your host, Frederick Smith, author of and narrator for The Acquired Taste for Adventure, a D&D audiobook series based upon actual Dungeons & Dragons games. And with that, let's get started. Alton's Story, The Acquired Taste for Adventure, Chapter 4, Concluded. The party of adventurers finished taking their short rest, worried that any longer would allow the goblins to escape with Dornan, or potentially kill him in their questioning. They began the process of unblocking the passageway, intending to leave Keldorn behind, knowing that he was safer where he was, rather than battling bugbears and goblins and who knew what else. They rebuilt the barricade behind them for Keldorn's safety, and the passageway they occupied was instantly plunged back into impenetrable darkness, save for the tiny cracks of firelight escaping around the edges of the crates. Alton was immediately forced to replace his goggles of night in order to avoid stumbling around in the tunnels. This magic item, so perfectly suited to Alton's duties, continued to pay dividends for the little halfling rogue, compensating for his race's lack of natural infravision. It was an ironic joke of the gods that Alton couldn't naturally see in the dark, but these spectacles made up for the lacking. They moved through the tunnels until they returned to the three-way intersection, where Alton spied his chalk marks that identified the passage they had come from originally. Idriana, their half-drow tracker, searched along the surface of the muddy floor, finding the same drag marks as before, and showed the group how these marks went into the middle passage of the three. She and Alton quietly crept forward together, with him looking for traps and sentries, and Idriana focused on following the trail ahead. Alton followed behind Idriana, with a wary eye, still not completely trusting the half-drow's intentions just yet. After tiptoeing through a few slow bends in the tunnels, they both spotted a goblin sentry posted on the other side of a small wooden footbridge which spanned a 10-foot-wide chasm in the rock. The gap had a steep cliff on both sides, and while the two couldn't see the bottom of the drop from their current vantage point, it certainly looked like it was high enough to cause injury if someone fell in. Idriana and Alton both raised their weapons to fire upon the monster, just in case the other one missed their shot, but as it happened, neither did. The goblin fell to the floor, with an arrow and a crossbow bolt planted squarely into its chest and belly, while Idriana and Alton nodded at each other in mutual admiration of the other's marksmanship. Alton stopped the group short before they crossed the bridge, though. The halfling scoundrel recognized that this was another bottleneck for travel, and he didn't trust the bridge to be free of traps. His suspicions were not unfounded, as a brief inspection revealed that the drawbridge was rigged to fall, designed to dump the would-be bridge crossers onto the jagged rocks below by the use of a handled lever that one could throw from the goblin's side of the bridge. But since the monster was already dead, there was no one to deploy the trap, and they could safely cross the span without fear of falling. Once the group had gotten to the other side, Alton disabled the trap's triggering mechanism, so that no one would ever fall prey to it again. The half-drow ranger, Idriana, got the group's attention and showed them a set of footprints that were clearly different than the goblin's prints they had become accustomed to seeing. These were much larger, and had noticeable claws at the ends of the toes. Because this was the only set of such prints they had seen so far, and because of the descriptions they'd heard, they had a feeling they had to be getting close to the lair of Bullk, the Bugbear. Alton sneaked ahead, hoping to provide the group with any information he could before they got into another scrape with the monsters. He felt like he was beginning to get the hang of this adventuring business, which was still new to him. It was good, honest work as he saw it, and despite the obvious dangers it presented, he would probably end up doing it again, provided it actually paid off, of course. So far, he hadn't found anything more than 5 silver pieces and a fire arrow, a pittance of a payday. But he remained hopeful that more treasures still lay in wait for him, whether found in the caves or given to him by an appreciative Dornan. But either way, he wouldn't need to worry about justifying where his funds came from, neither to himself nor to anyone else. The halfling thief saw firelight dancing on the walls of the tunnels ahead, and removed his goggles of night, knowing that they would only hurt his eyes as he approached the next room. Arriving at the left-turning corner, he motioned for the group to quietly rejoin him as he silently peeked around. He saw a roughly rectangular expanse, 80 paces deep but only 30 paces wide, with more stacked crates staggered about the left side of the room. Alton spied 3 monsters sitting around a roaring fire near the far wall. 2 were goblins, both with their backs to the group, armed with the same scimitars and shields that they had seen before, and both wearing an ill-fitting and obviously stolen bronze breastplate on their chests. Facing toward Alton, but conversing with the 2 goblins in front of him, sat another massive, heavily muscled creature, more or less goblinoid in appearance, but covered in thick brown fur and possessing a much thicker brow and jawline. The monster was clothed in a hide wrap that covered its hairy legs and was drumming its fingers on the handle of a large Morningstar mace that sat across its lap. Suddenly, a vicious warg, lying on its belly behind the stack of crates, leaped up, barking and snarling at Alton as it started to rush for him. It found the end of its chain as it lurched forward, choking itself in a vain attempt to catch the halfling. But the damage had been done. His cover had been blown, and the group of monsters stood up to look in his direction. The Bugbear had the warg on a leash that he held in his furry fist, and his Morningstar at the ready in the other. The rest of the adventurers, alerted by the barking of the warg, didn't need a signal from Alton this time. They rushed into the room, surrounding him and taking up positions for a fight. Pardon the interruption, but if you're enjoying my work, please like, subscribe, and leave me a comment down below. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to receive notifications whenever I upload a new video. Alton's Story, The Acquired Taste for Adventure, Chapter 5. Iarno was pleased that he hadn't been forced to fight the members of the Red Brand after he'd killed their leader. If they'd ever had much loyalty to Durban, it disappeared quickly in the face of danger. Especially so when Iarno, who was operating under the alias Glassstaff, told him that he wasn't terribly interested in the baubles they stole from the merchants in town. In fact, he was willing to accept a much smaller share of their take than Durban had demanded, which was, of course, because he wouldn't be paying any shares to the Spider, whoever in the realms that was. Iarno would permit them to continue their tax collection and toll scams, provided they met 2 demands. First, he said while standing over the corpse of the former guard captain, anyone you kill during your duties should be turned over to me, not the town, nor to be buried in the field I found on the way into 3 Towers. This statement created quite a stir among them, so Iarno spoke his next words loudly to cut through the murmur. I will see to it that the bodies are taken care of properly, for your safety, and that none of you are pestered by any bothersome questions about it. I understand that merchants occasionally need to be reminded of their place, whether the town does or not. This demand seemed to go over well with the men, who exchanged understanding nods of appreciation. This Glassstaff fellow seemed to know what they were all about. And secondly, if anyone manages to seize contraband that seems like it might be magic, scrolls, books, even simple spell components, no matter how trivial you think it might be, you turn it over to me. Failure to do so will cost your life. This statement also created a stir among them, but it was an easy enough demand to meet. There was still plenty of opportunities for them to wet their beaks with stolen loot, even if they had to turn over anything magic they'd found. Provided you can meet these demands, we will have a long and prosperous relationship. The guards shuffled nervously for a bit, but none protested, which meant they seemed agreeable to the terms. I'm glad to see that we've reached an accord. You will hear from me again soon. You are all dismissed. Iarno adjourned the meeting as quickly as he'd assembled it, hastily sending the guards on their way before they had a thought to issue any demands of their own. There was one man he stopped, though. It was the whisker-faced old guardsman he'd manipulated at the northeast gate, who seemed as though he was the oldest and likely the most experienced man on the force. You there. What's your name? Finnegan, sir. The old man looked at his new boss with 1,000 unanswered questions. Who was he, really? Had the big bosses sent Glassstaff to take care of Durban? Perhaps the guard captain wasn't paying his tribute on time. Finnegan had always tried to keep his nose out of that part of the business, thinking it was safer for him that way. But maybe this was how scores were settled. Finnegan, Iarno smiled. Pleased to make your acquaintance. I want you to take me to Durbin's home and anywhere else you all congregate other than this fine bar. And I want you to tell me everything there is to know about your organization. You are now my right-hand man, Finnegan. Congratulations." He clapped the old guardsman on the back. "All right, sir," Finnegan said, trying to hide his doubt. "Follow me." What in the nine hells is going on? Finnegan wondered, as he started to lead the wizard to the old guard captain's house. Should he try to tell the higher-ups that Durbin had been killed, just to make sure everything was on the up and up? No. This Glassstaff guy was guaranteed to be found out if he wasn't on the level. And if he wasn't, the spider would surely find a way to settle the score. Finnegan decided to simply keep his head down and his mouth shut for now, figuring that was the safest course of action to take. Besides, he had taxes to collect. And that is where we are going to leave it for today. But rest assured, we will pick up from where our story left off in next week's episode. Thank you so much for staying until the end of the video. And if you enjoyed what you heard, please consider donating to my Patreon, which you can find linked in the description. I appreciate all of you. And until next time, please be kind to yourselves and to each other.